Hi everyone, Diablo 4 Season 7 is just around the corner, and of course Maxwell is hard at work to bring you all of the updated build guides and tier lists. And that's what I want to talk about here. We just had our meeting earlier, sticking our heads together to try to figure out what is going on, what are the best builds and the worst builds out there in Season 7. A lot of changes are coming, lots of balance changes. The patch notes are pretty large. I also covered them already a little bit from the previous campfire chat in another video if you want to see that. You can also go check out our Maxwell post here, for example, detailing all of the changes coming from Season 6. And you can see it's quite a lot here. So what you need to know about the season is there is this new witchcraft theme. So this is a little bit like Season 1 and Season 2, the Millennium Hearts and the vampire powers mashed together. And this has the theme of kind of like the witch doctor from Diablo 3. So you get like new stockable like occult gems that you can see here. You can put it in your jewelry, and then you get these extra witch powers that are, you know, just like extra affixes, like a little bit like aspects basically in a special interface. And this also shakes up the general meta and build viability. But not only that, there are also some new items and some tweaks to, for example, ultimate skills in this patch that affect all classes and that also create entirely new builds or really elevate some of them. So overall, there has been quite a shift in the overall meta between the classes. For example, in Season 6, we had the absolute dominance of Spiritborn because there were several bugs that made it like 1,000 times or even more stronger than the other classes, and that is no longer the case. So the Spiritborn has been fixed finally. I suppose a lot of people are waiting for that, but it also means that Spiritborn is just not going to be that crazy this time around. It's still going to be solid. I do have, you know, nothing to complain about, let's say, but it's not going to be like the absolute ultra class. Instead, this is our Endgame and Pit push tier list here right now. So this is mostly what we expect with regards to clearing the highest pits possible. What you need to know about this is that we don't really expect that any of those builds will actually struggle to do Torment 4 content, at least once you get to the point where your character is somewhat decked out with like all of the important stuff and, you know, maybe masterworks and so on. So even the low tier builds will relatively easily blast through Torment 4. And anything else beyond that is basically this pit pushing tier list where we expect, okay, how high will the different builds actually rank among each other. So there will be some builds that will maybe cap out at like 100 or maybe even less than that. But generally, most builds, if you pilot them properly and you deck them out, will probably get to the point where the glyphs can be maxed or very close to it at least, meaning you can get the full potential of your character unlocked. And then, of course, the higher tier builds, B, A, and S, they will just make it easier and easier to actually get to that point, and it will require less gear, less investment. You know, it's less of a struggle, basically, to get to those higher tiers. And then on the very high end, well, it's gonna get pretty wild because we might actually see Pit 150 clears again, which is completely ridiculous to think about, considering that outside of Spiritborn and then, you know, Mighty Throw Barb or something that was relatively strong, but not really anywhere on the same level as the Spiritborn. There were no other builds in Season 6 that really cleared much beyond like 120 or so. And well, 120 to 150 is a pretty significant jump of, I don't know, something like a times 100 or so. But yeah, it seems like we might have legitimate, not crazy bugged builds that actually clear 150 in Season 7. So this is kind of like this power gain curve that we have seen here. And this is no other than the Bloodwave Necromancer and potentially even the Cataclysm Druid. So apparently there's quite some potential here on those two builds. And even the Earthquake Barb. It seems like our Barbs are very optimistic about this, that it will go extremely high. So those are what we expect to be the top 3 builds that are probably even set apart from the rest a little bit that we have here in the S tier. But in general, it's looking like basically most of the classes have something that goes, you know, way beyond 100. In some cases, even multiple builds here, as you can see. But just to be kind of safe, we moved Spiritborn out of S tier. I don't expect that even Quill Volley, for example, will get to the same point, and we'll see exactly how it will shake up. Another thing that you might notice here is that there are a lot of ultimate skill builds. So you have the Blood Wave, we have the Cataclysm, there's Death Trap, there's Rain of Arrows, there's Lacerate even, so that's gonna get its own guide as well. That's actually a thing now. So there are a bunch of these ultimate based builds because Blizzard has upgraded ultimates to, first of all, they have more aspects now, some more damage support, and they also get an extra rank 5 upgrade now. So in some cases this means some ridiculous damage scaling, for example. and this is the case here with some of these. So that's also why they rank so high, or they can really make great use of those witch power effects and for example snapshot some effects, or for example snapshot crit and overpower like a Cataclysm Druid. So there are some really strong synergies in some cases, and also there were some rune changes, for example, that also help some of those builds a little bit more than others. But yeah, in general we see that there is a lot of rogue up here as well. So we have 4 rogue builds with like Rapid Fire being somewhat on the lower end here in S, but we do expect great things anyway. And then Rain of Arrows, Death Trap. I've played a lot of Death Trap in Season 6 already. I really like that build, so I'm probably gonna just release a new video on that as well, and probably even try it out. I'm actually planning to start a rogue, so maybe I'll play Death Trap again, but yeah, we'll see. Twisting Blades is also like really high up here. Twisting Blades has received some crazy stuff. In general, rogues are looking really good because Shadow Clone is finally a thing. So that is going to be very exciting. And I guess a lot of people have been waiting for that. And not only that, there's also just some other nice big buffs here. For example, Twisting Blades itself, that now is like way stronger against single targets and has better clear and so on, and other nice tweaks. And then we also have the Necros here. So as I said, Bloodwave, probably the strongest build out there, but we do have Bone Spear Necro, which is now actually Blood Spear. So there is like a new unique for it that actually transforms the skill. Bone Spirit is still up there, that was really strong before, it remains really strong, and in general there's a lot of like A tier, like all the blood builds, the Sever, I think we have Blight somewhere here. So in general, everything on Necro is looking really good, with some stuff going really crazy, so they are also eating good. And we also have Barbs and Druids performing relatively well here. So we have 2 S tier Druids, and then there's also more in A. There's Boulder can now be cast while moving, for example. So that's kind of a nice little change here. Spin to win in some way, similar to like Whirlwind or something, basically. So you can do that. Yeah, in general, Druid have also received some pretty strong buffs. And yeah, most of the Barb stuff is also quite far up. The classes that are a little bit on the weak end are the Sorcerers and the Spiritborn. So I think Sorcerer is probably the weakest here. They did receive some nice upgrades and generally at least remained roughly the same or got better, but we also like kind of changed the tier list scaling a little bit, so this might make it seem like Sorc actually kind of lost power, which is not actually the case. We just raised the bar a little bit because the general power level has increased, and with that we needed to make sure that there's actually this power difference properly displayed on the tier list. I mean, don't just have like, 20 builds up here in S tier or something like that. So the bar has risen, and this means that Sorc is just not looking as strong as the other classes. It will certainly be fine to play, and as I mentioned, anything up here can get to the point where Torment 4 at the release is no problem, or even get the glyphs to 100. This is the Sorcs included, but yeah, everything is just kind of like a little bit on the weaker side, we expect. There's one exception here, which is Firebolt Sorc. So this is like the highest up build on the Sorc, which is still based on the Shatter bug. So this is an extremely fishy, extremely hard to play setup that requires a lot of RNG to actually be that successful, and it's extremely inconsistent. So if you think that, oh, I'm gonna play this, I would be a bit cautious. Be aware that this is just not really always working that well. So some other builds on a Sorc that are just much more viable and consistent are, for example, Incinerate. That's going to get its own guide finally. I know a lot of people have been asking for this in the past, and it's finally coming. Incinerate is looking pretty good for the Sorcs at least, and we still have Lightning Spear, Fireball, and a bunch of these other builds down here. And as for the Spiritborn, so we have like the same old candidates. Quill Volley is looking really good. The link is broken right now, but there should be the guide. And well, there is Crushing Hand and so on. A lot of stuff that we have played in Season 6 that will remain relatively good for Spiritborn standards, but it's really hard to really grasp like how strong or how weak are they going to be, because they definitely had like the biggest shift in power, because all the bugs have now disappeared and all at once everything shifted. So we have to see how this actually plays out, but I was kind of like cautiously pessimistic, let's say, about the Spiritborn, and maybe they turn out better than we think. So we can also still move it up later when we do a tier list update. For now, I think Spiritborn are going to be just fine. They're going to be very fast, very fun, just like before. There has not really been a huge shift in their playstyles, outside of the fact that maybe some builds don't run the Rod of Kipperleki anymore, which has been very heavily nerfed. So there are other options in some builds that are actually just better now, or at the least like on a similar level. And this means that they might play a little bit differently. So with how do you figure out the resources and so on. But other than that, we have the same old builds. We also are adding Toxic Skin and the Razor Wings guide, so you can also check those out when they're ready. And then we have even more stuff here on the Spiritborn. But the mobility of this class is definitely unparalleled. I guess only many Sorcs really go faster than that, with like all of the like, you know, jumping to enemies kind of built in with Ravager and, you know, various other abilities that the Spiritborn has. Makes them very good farming setups, and you're gonna have a blast with that anyway, even if it feels much weaker than in Season 6. Personally, I'm also still updating some of those Spiritborn guides, so for example, Quill Volley, Crushing Hand, and so on. Stinger as well, I'm quite excited to try that. That has actually received some upgrades with the Unique, for example, and some of the Pestilence Swarm effects like the Rune. So I really look forward to playing that again. I've already done that in Season 6 and I really liked it. So stay tuned for some of my guides for the Spiritborn as well. And yeah, we'll see how this will go when I actually play it. Maybe after the Rogue, or maybe I'll even start the Spiritborn again. And that also pretty much sums up everything you need to know for the overview of this endgame tier list here right now. Of course, take everything with a bit of a grain of salt, because some stuff is untested. There were a lot of shifts and changes in the final patch notes that we didn't have any chance to try out, for example. And of course, stay tuned for an update. I'll probably, like a week down the line or something, make an updated video, and we're also gonna publish an updated tier list here on Maxwell, for example. Also, go check out the other tier lists as well. Maybe I can go briefly over them, but we do have more refined tier lists as well. If you're looking for bossing, if you're looking to farm a lot of Duriels, for example, so you might want to switch your setup. The armory is coming, so it's very easy to set something else up and then swap back and forth. If you, for example, playing a build that is not that great at single target normally, you can try to make another one, and then you can see what's up here. But at some point, every class will have a build that just completely destroys those Tormentor bosses, even in 4-man parties on Torment 4. And for example, here in S tier, we expect all these builds with like kind of just one-shot Duriel at some point or something like that, so that you can just farm your mythics, farm your uniques, and so on very easily. Then we also have the speed farming builds tier list. So this is mostly based on, for example, Hell Tides and all this kind of like outdoor content. Whispers is going to be a pretty big thing in Season 7, for example, with the whole witchcraft theme. You have to go do Whispers all the time. So if you're looking for something that's just like flies through the zones, well, nothing can beat the Sorc mobility. So we have them far up there with like the biggest AoE builds. And then there's Rogues and Spiritborn, of course, also very high mobility classes, and they're usually kind of just a little bit faster than the rest. So this is kind of what we have here, but there are many builds to choose from, because as I mentioned earlier as well, Torment 4 is not really an obstacle for many builds in a late game. And like this, you can just go all in, get the teleport rune in there if you want, with the jar rune, and you just fly with basically any class if you really want to. And again, the armory comes in handy for that. And of course, our updated leveling builds tier list, not really too many shifts here, but we are also adding the Incinerate Sorc here as a new guide, and then a few tweaks here. For example, the Barbs are a little bit further up. This is mostly due to the fact that they buffed the Earthquake rune, which also makes this Earthquake build much more powerful, and some other tweaks that this build has received. So that is looking very strong, and this also helps the Barbs. If you find that rune in the early game, for example, basically any class even, if you find a tech rune, which is a magic rune, you can get it very early. This is the Earthquake spawning one, and it just absolutely annihilates. So if you get that, try to make that trigger, and it will just destroy everything around you, basically, even on other classes than Barb. So keep that in mind when you level up. You also have the rune and rune words tier list and the unique items tier list. So we went through those as well, just to kind of give you a bit of an idea of the general usefulness and value of certain runes. So yeah, of course, this might depend on the build, this might depend on a class even, but kind of like the general idea of like how popular are some of those choices in each of the builds. And the same thing goes here with the unique items tier list. So we kind of rank them by usefulness overall, with like, okay, how meta are they? How many builds use them, and so on. And you can get a bit of an idea of which of those items to keep around and which you should try to sell, for example. So go check those out as well. And with that, I guess we have everything covered. So most importantly, check out the endgame tier list. I will link all of these here down in the description as well. And of course, keep an eye on updates as we go. So as the season progresses, especially in the first week or two, we're gonna be probably shifting some stuff around here so that it stays up to date for the rest of the season, at least until mid-season patch. And that's what I have to share here for today. So let me know what you think. Hope that you're gonna have a good time in Season 7. Stay tuned for some of my videos, and of course I'll be blasting, at least for a while, and then eventually we're probably gonna go back to Path of Exile, or we'll like jump between the two games. We'll see exactly. I haven't really made up my mind just yet. I'm certainly excited to jump into some D4 again as well. And of course, let me know what you are planning to start in Season 7. So just what build are you choosing and why? I'm gonna go through the comments. I would be just curious to hear what's on your mind. So hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.